When William entered the room and placed the sealed envelope on the mahogany table, no one knew it held a declaration that would rattle Buckingham to its core. Clarence House Camilla's long-standing royal residence was no longer hers to oversee. What followed was not just a transfer of property, but a declaration of legacy, power, and betrayal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The corridors of power often whisper louder than the voices inside them, and on this particular day, those whispers carried the scent of a coming storm. Behind gilded doors and velvet drapes, a silent decision had been made, one that would strip Queen Camilla of what she considered her cornerstone. Clarence House, steeped in royal history, stood not just as a residence, but a throne in stone, a symbolic affirmation of her place in the royal pecking order. The lineage etched into its very walls was heavy with the memory of generations past. It had once been home to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, a woman whose presence still haunted its staircases. Camilla had made it her sanctuary after her marriage to Charles, believing that her occupancy there was more than ceremonial, it was personal. It was permanence. Yet behind her back, far from the glinting chandeliers and royal receptions, Prince William had been orchestrating something seismic. Working quietly with the Royal Estate Council, he had positioned himself not only as the future monarch, but as a decisive architect of the monarchy's next chapter. It wasn't just property, this was about reshaping legacy itself. The idea had been whispered into elite ears with delicate precision that Clarence House should serve not the current queen consort, but the future of the crown. And that future had a name: George. There had been no public meeting, no official press release. Instead, the matter was settled in a private royal session, where William's intentions were presented as fait accompli. The signatures were collected, the plans finalized, all without Camilla's presence or input. A decision sealed in silence, wrapped in protocol, and delivered with cold finality. There were murmurings of Catherine's quiet but consistent presence in those council conversations, not forceful, but strategic, supportive in a way that reassured the older council members of continuity and grace. She didn't need to declare sides, her silence was louder than loyalty. And just like that, a home became a message. William's gesture to his son wasn't just logistical, it was ideological. It signaled the dawn of a new royal era, one where the next generation wouldn't wait in the wings, but would be prepared, elevated and protected in advance. The shockwaves this decision would send through the palace were both anticipated and, perhaps, quietly welcomed by some who had long felt the monarchy needed to be re-centered. But the shock wasn't just in the decision, it was in how it was done. And when Camilla discovered the truth, her reaction was anything but composed. Witnesses described it as a royal eruption. Camilla stormed into her private quarters, voice raised, hands trembling, demanding answers. She'd been blindsided, stripped of what she believed was hers, and all signs pointed to William as the mastermind behind the betrayal. What began as quiet disbelief quickly surged into fury. The moment Camilla confirmed the truth, that Clarence House had been reassigned to young Prince George without her knowledge or consultation, her world shifted. For years she had clung to Clarence House not just as a residence, but as a symbol of her permanence, a bastion of her slow and steady rise from mistress to queen. It was, in many ways, her proof that the past had been forgiven, that she was now woven into the royal tapestry with threads too tight to pull. But in one cold decision, she realized how expendable that presence had become. The queen consort's rage wasn't theatrical, it was visceral. Palace aides, some of whom had served her loyally for over a decade, were stunned as she lashed out, overturning a gilded writing tray, demanding to know who had signed off and why Charles hadn't told her first. But the most deafening blow was his silence. When she confronted him in their adjoining suite later that evening, Charles had no answers, only weary eyes and mumbled rationalizations about legacy and transition. He hadn't stopped it. Worse, he may have known about it and let it happen. Camilla, in that moment, saw the writing on the wall. The reign she had barely begun was already being dismantled piece by piece, with William, Catherine, and now George positioned as the future's foundation. Her fury turned inward, and then outward again. According to palace insiders, she was overheard muttering, "This is war," And Catherine is winning. Not a whisper. A declaration. It wasn't just about a building, it was everything she'd endured to get there. The years of public scorn, the tightly managed appearances, the exhausting efforts to prove herself worthy of the Queen Consort title. And Clarence House had been her haven through it all. The royal receptions, the quiet meetings with charities, the dinners with visiting dignitaries, it had been her domain. To have it taken and given to a child, no matter how royal, felt like a personal erasure. And yet, in the aftermath of her outburst, patterns began to crystallize. The increasing number of official engagements being passed to Catherine. The subtle removal of Camilla from high-profile ceremonies. Even the shift in staff behavior, a certain P.O. light distance that hadn't always been there. Looking back, she realized the cold shouldering had begun long before the Clarence House announcement. She simply hadn't seen it for what it was. But Camilla's outrage was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, a much deeper plan was unfolding. This wasn't a last-minute decision. Insiders now revealed that Prince William had been laying the groundwork for months, meeting with royal advisors, orchestrating quiet votes, and building a silent coalition to ensure Clarence House would bypass Camilla and land directly in George's future. Far from the public's eye, a quiet campaign had already begun. While Camilla enjoyed the comfort of routine, William was holding discreet discussions with senior figures on the royal trust. These were not idle conversations, they were strategic overtures. He spoke of continuity, of the monarchy's survival in the modern world, of future-proofing legacies before cracks widened. What troubled him, he hinted, was not the present Queen Consort, but the shadows she might leave in the institution long after Charles's reign had passed. It wasn't personal, at least not overtly, it was political. There had been growing murmurs within the royal estate that Camilla's influence over certain properties and the tone she had set around their use risked tethering the monarchy too tightly to a past it was desperately trying to move beyond. And in these circles, William's concerns were met with nods, not resistance. He spoke of Clarence House not just as a structure, but as a symbol. It had been reclaimed once before by the Queen Mother. Then by Charles, and William believed it was time to repurpose it again. This time not for a reigning monarch, but for a monarch in waiting. George, young, unburdened and untouched by controversy. A blank slate, a living promise. With Catherine by his side, William moved deftly. Ing her natural diplomacy and unshakable poise to win over those still on the fence. She didn't push, she persuaded. Her presence at certain meetings, casual yet calculated, helped calm doubts. She was never the architect, but always the seal of assurance. Behind the curtain, she became the gentle echo to William's vision, steady, warm, yet resolute. The strategy deepened. Transferring a royal residence to a child was no ordinary act. It demanded legal review, ceremonial alignment, and full council consensus. But William had prepared. His team studied protocols, cited historical precedents, and ensured every measure was locked in place before a single word reached the public sphere. When the final vote was taken, there were no dissents. The Clarence House decree wasn't a whim, it was a blueprint, born from careful moves across a royal chessboard. And George, though still in the innocence of youth, had been cast in a role far beyond his comprehension. To the public, he would be a future king. But within palace walls, he had already become the monarchy's lifeline. His name, attached to Clarence House, was the clearest signal yet that the crown's future was being carved not by tradition, but by design. But while William prepared the chessboard, Camilla wasn't about to sit quietly, she was preparing her counterattack. She wasted no time. Within 48 hours of the announcement, Camilla drafted a private memorandum, her version of a royal veto, and sent it to the king. But what she didn't anticipate was that Charles might not sign it, or worse, that he already knew. The moment Clarence House slipped from her grasp, Camilla's instinct was to retaliate through protocol. She turned not to public outcry, but to the one weapon she still believed she had: her proximity to the throne. The letter she composed was urgent, sharp, and calculated. It called for unity, yes, but beneath that V, I'll were unmistakable warnings. She urged Charles to reconsider, warned of destabilization, hinted at dissent within the senior family ranks. Though never outright naming William or Catherine, the implication was crystal clear: this was a hostile overreach disguised as progress. In her eyes, this wasn't just about a house, it was a hijacking of royal authority under the guise of legacy planning, and she was being squeezed out with frightening efficiency. She sealed the letter by hand. No aides, no intermediaries. It arrived on Charles's desk within hours. But then, silence. Days passed. No reply, no acknowledgement. And slowly dread began to seep in. Reports from inside the palace began to circulate. Charles had received the memorandum, read it, and quietly shelved it. He wasn't consulting his private secretary. He wasn't seeking legal counsel. He was waiting. Whether it was paralysis or quiet agreement with William's vision, no one could say. But to Camilla, the delay was damning. It suggested not just indifference, but complicity. That her husband, her king, had already chosen his side and it wasn't hers. The confrontation, when it finally happened, was raw and personal. Camilla demanded clarity, and Charles, burdened by the weight of both legacy and love, could offer none. Torn between the loyalty he owed to the woman who stood by him for decades and the demands of the future now so visibly embodied in William and George, he hesitated. But in the eyes of Camilla, hesitation was betrayal. Voices rose. Years of tension boiled to the surface. She accused him of standing back, while Catherine redrew the royal map, of allowing their shared reign to be hollowed out before it had even reached its full shape. "You've let her vision eclipse the crown," she said, not out of jealousy, but out of the ache of erasure. Charles stood still, torn and silent, as the Queen Consort's step. Ped back not just physically, but emotionally. The royal memorandum had been her attempt to reclaim relevance, to restore her standing before the world. But with her words unanswered and her anger dismissed, she now stood alone at the edge of a monarchy being quietly reshaped around her. The silence in that room spoke louder than the arguments. And outside those walls, something louder still was beginning to rise. But while Camilla fought from within, the public was beginning to catch wind, and the media storm would make the matter impossible to contain. Tabloids branded it the Clarence House coup. The public now had their narrative: Queen Camilla blindsided, Prince William ascending, and little Prince George anointed far sooner than expected. The optics, a brutal generational shift unfolding in real time. What had been, until then, an internal storm suddenly burst into public view with a velocity the palace hadn't anticipated. Headlines thundered across breakfast tables: Camilla out, George in, William's power play, the Queen without a kingdom. Within hours of the leak transfer, media outlets from London to Sydney picked apart the palace's silence, filling the void with speculation, insider whispers, and biting editorials. Commentators began to frame William as the modernizer, bold, forward-thinking, determined to clear the remnants of controversy from the monarchy's future. Camilla, by contrast, was recast as the relic of a fading chapter, still clinging to a home that had already slipped through her fingers. Inside the palace, the communications team scrambled. Official statements were delayed, revised, and ultimately diluted. Every attempt at neutralizing the firestorm only added fuel to it. With each passing hour, the silence from Buckingham seemed less like control and more like capitulation. Meanwhile, Catherine's public appearance the following day deepened the contrast. She arrived at a children's charity event, elegant and composed, her smile unwavering despite the media frenzy. To the public, it wasn't just poise, it was confirmation. The future queen was not just surviving the storm, she was sailing through it with grace. Across town, Camilla was captured by paparazzi entering her car, her expression unreadable but unmistakably hardened. The symbolism was devastating. Catherine bathed in approval, Camilla shadowed in solitude. The court of public opinion didn't hesitate. Polls shifted overnight, showing increased support for William's vision of the monarchy. George's name trended globally as commentators debated whether it was too soon, too abrupt, or just the spark the crown needed. The narrative, once subtle, had exploded into a full-blown royal spectacle, but behind the headlines lay something darker. Leaks had begun trickling into the press from palace insiders, hinting that the Clarence House transfer was merely the first of several transitions in motion. Words like succession restructuring and advisory overhaul began to circulate. Camilla's allies started to fear this wasn't just a one-off slight, it was a systematic repositioning, with Catherine and William at the helm, and Charles silently permitting it all. The image of unity crumbled by the day. As whispers turned to warnings, the monarchy was realigning, and Camilla's place within it was no longer secure. As the storm raged outside, Camilla turned to her remaining allies inside the palace. But even that circle was beginning to fracture. Camilla had once relied on a select few duchesses for counsel, but now whispers revealed a disturbing truth. Sophie and even Princess Alexandra had aligned themselves with William's camp. For Camilla, the betrayal hit closer than the loss of any building. For years, Camilla's true strength hadn't come from lairs or public appearances, it came from the quiet influence she held in corners the cameras never reached. Private luncheons in polished drawing rooms, candid exchanges behind closed doors. Her bond with Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had been particularly treasured. They had weathered seasons of scandal, stood beside one another at state functions, and often found solace in their shared outsider status. Princess Alexandra, too, had offered the kind of old-world loyalty that Camilla clung to in moments of uncertainty. But the Clarence House decision shattered those illusions. When Camilla reached out looking for alliance, expecting empathy, she was met with polite distance, and in some cases, complete avoidance. Sophie had declined to publicly support her objection to the transfer, citing institutional neutrality. But those within the palace whispered that neutrality was just a veil. In truth, Sophie had quietly voiced her agreement with William's vision, suggesting it was forward-facing and appropriate for the future of the crown. And the most cutting blow came from Princess Alexandra, who issued a rare public statement in support of the decision, calling it a thoughtful move, reflecting a future-focused legacy. Camilla was stunned. Not only had she lost Clarence House, but she had also lost the foundational relationships that once shielded her from feeling entirely alone within the firm. That isolation became palpable. Her tone shifted. Her presence at briefings grew increasingly rare. Aides noted how she arrived late, left early, or avoided meetings altogether. One staffer confided she had begun withdrawing from scheduled engagements without explanation, her spirit dimmed not by headlines but by betrayal. Inside Clarence House, the atmosphere changed. Flowers, once kept fresh, were left to wilt. Curtains, once drawn to let in light, now remained closed. And in a quietly heartbreaking moment, Camilla was seen instructing staff to remove a series of framed photographs from the central hallway, images of her early days with Charles, official portraits from overseas visits, candid snapshots with her closest royal confidants. A silent gesture that spoke louder than any confrontation. She wasn't just mourning the loss of a residence, she was mourning the collapse of the world she had carefully built around it. What remained was a hollow sense of position without power, a crown without counsel. The very alliances that had once fortified her now stood in support of the same forces that had pushed her to the edge. Her relevance, once hard-won, now felt paper-thin. The walls were closing in, not from William or Catherine directly, but from the subtle shift in loyalties that made her position untenable. And still, the wheels turned. Because in the royal family, when one falls, another rises. But just as Camilla's support crumbled, a final humiliation awaited one that would redefine her royal standing. It was brief, quiet, but devastatingly symbolic. In a closed ceremony attended only by senior royals, Clarence House was officially designated for Prince George's future occupancy. And Camilla, not invited. Not even mentioned in the closing statement. The decision had already been made, but this moment made it final. It wasn't the grandeur of the ceremony that struck the blow. It was the silence, the calculated absence of acknowledgement. Within the walls of St. James's, the royal circle gathered, not for a coronation or a jubilee, but for a handover cloaked in tradition and precision. William stood tall, his voice steady as he read aloud the decree that named his son the guardian of legacy. The words echoed through the chamber, not just as a formality but as a statement of power, of transition, of lineage redirected. Catherine remained composed by his side, offering no speech, no gesture, just a resolute presence that confirmed everything the public had already begun to believe. She was not only beside the future of the monarchy, she was shaping it. The Archbishop gave the final blessing. A royal document bearing the seal of the sovereign was placed into a locked archive, symbolizing permanence. And though George stood among them, too young to understand the layers of conflict his name now carried, his role was set. He was the figurehead of the monarchy's next chapter, cast unknowingly into a legacy that had been marred by quiet betrayal and strategic maneuvers. The innocence on his face only deepened the emotional weight of the occasion. Clarence House would one day be his home not as a child, but as an institution, a symbol, a signal that the baton had passed not between reigns but between ideologies. That same evening, staff at Clarence House began the quiet task of clearing out certain personal effects. Items tied solely to Camilla gifts, artwork, family mementos were boxed and moved into a private storage unit. There was no official order, no documentation. It was simply understood. The space was shifting, and so too was the palace's unspoken message. Camilla, once present in every hallway, every room, was being removed without ceremony. There were no tears, no protests, just the creak of floorboards and the muted shuffling of trusted staff obeying orders they hadn't needed to hear aloud. The moment was meant to be elegant, clean, dignified. But for those who knew the truth, it was a coronation in disguise, a declaration that Clarence House no longer belonged to the Queen Consort, but to the future king, whose crown was still decades away, yet whose shadow now loomed over every decision. Camilla's name wasn't spoken, her title omitted, her presence erased, and with that, the monarchy had turned a page, one that could never be rewritten. But Camilla wasn't done, not yet. Her final move came not through protocol, but through a whisper meant to ignite rebellion. In a shadowed corner of the palace, Camilla was overheard murmuring, "If they take my home, they'll regret the crown." What followed was a carefully placed leak, a rumor that Queen Camilla was preparing to challenge succession frameworks. And with that whisper, a war of titles had truly begun. The quote spread like wildfire, first among staff, then within high-ranking circles, and finally beyond the palace gates. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The words were low, deliberate, and laced with venom. For a queen consort to utter such a threat, to suggest regret not just for a decision, but for the monarchy itself, was an earthquake in royal protocol. And whether by accident or design, the statement found its way into the press through a single, quiet leak. What followed was chaos. Reports emerged that Camilla had begun commissioning a private legal review into the inheritance structures, governing ceremonial titles and royal honours. Was she preparing to contest George's early elevation, to force a reconsideration of the traditional path to power? Or was it all a bluff meant to rattle nerves, sow division, and buy time? The palace didn't confirm, nor did it deny. And that silence only fed the fire. Whispers hinted at Camilla reaching out beyond Britain, subtle diplomatic gestures to foreign royals and international figures with long-standing ties to her. Not for support, necessarily, but for leverage. She wasn't just mourning her erasure, she was calculating her next move. In her mind, this wasn't simply about Clarence House, it was about the deeper currents threatening to pull her under, while elevating Catherine without a crown. But for Charles, the timing was suffocating. Already caught in a storm between tradition and transition, he now faced a domestic Cold War. His wife had turned defiant, his son had turned dominant, and the monarchy he swore to preserve was fragmenting under his watch. He said nothing, gave no interviews, issued no clarifications, but aides reported a noticeable. Tension meetings shortened, voices hushed, presence withdrawn. Amid all of it, George remained blissfully unaware. Protected from the noise, shielded from the power plays, his role grew heavier with every headline. He had become a symbol, a pawn, and a prize, all while still years from understanding the throne he was slowly being tied to. And then there was Catherine. A photograph captured her walking hand in hand with George during a quiet visit to the royal chapel. She said nothing to reporters, she smiled gently, but her presence, as always, spoke volumes. unshaken, composed, and enduring. A portrait of stability amid swirling unrest. And as the palace falls into uneasy silence, one question remains. Has the war for Clarence House sparked a royal reckoning no one can contain? What began as a simple property transfer has escalated into a full-blown legacy war. The monarchy stands at a crossroads. Queen Camilla's fury, William's strategy, and George's unknowingly crowned future now hang in delicate balance. The Clarence House dispute may be only the beginning. Once considered just another residence within the royal estate, Clarence House has now become something far greater. It is no longer just bricks, glass, and royal furniture. It is a symbol of lineage, territory, and narrative. A house that once embodied continuity now reflects fracture. Its transfer wasn't just administrative, it was a torch passed, or rather, seized from one chapter of the monarchy to another. And in that gesture, the old guard was left watching, some in silence, others in shock, as the tides of power shifted irreversibly toward a new, sharper future. The moment Clarence House was given to George, the monarchy announced something without ever having to say it out loud. The next era will not wait. Camilla's influence, once cautiously accepted and steadily rising, now seems to dim in real time. She once presided with quiet conviction. Her voice has grown faint. The subtle cold shoulders from other royals, the lack of defense from Charles, and the absence of allies in recent decisions point to a steady unraveling. Not from scandal or disgrace, but from strategic obsolescence. Her reign was brief, complicated, and always walked a fragile line. But now it appears that line is vanishing beneath her feet. And as her shadow recedes, William's rises. No throne yet, no crown on his head, but his authority pulses stronger with every silent nod from the council, every decisive step that repositions the monarchy under his watch. There is no shouting, no declarations, but the message is clear. William is no longer waiting his turn. He's shaping it. By his side stands Catherine, immovable and serene. In a world of shifting allegiances and courtly chaos, she has emerged as the monarchy's quiet constant. Without demanding control, she commands loyalty. Without challenging titles, she redefines roles. She is not just a Princess of Wales. She is the image of what the monarchy wants to become, composed, unshaken, and future-bound. And in her son, that future already has a face. George, unaware of the power plays surrounding him, is now tethered to a legacy forged not just through birthright, but through battle. He didn't ask to be the center of a storm, but the crown has already touched him symbolically, ceremonially, and publicly. What that will mean for him in the years to come is still unknown, but the path he's now walking is one paved with both privilege and peril. The echoes of this royal earthquake will linger for generations, because when you move a house in the monarchy, you shift the throne itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.